Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today, guys, I bring you the Dragon Hunter Ranger. And before we get started, disclaimer, this is a roleplay casual play build. It is not meant for meta play. So let's go ahead and get into the little story and background to these characters. So since the rise of the dragons, or the resurrection of a dragon in Fanglair, the dragon hunters have started coming out of their hiding, not their hiding, but more or less out of the outskirts of civilization and making their way back into society because of this. And then with elsewhere, the rise of the dragons, they are out in full force hunting dragons all over elsewhere. Let's go ahead and get into the character itself. So we are a Breton Dragonknight for this. This is the Dragon Hunter Ranger, and this works out awesome with this setup. So let's go ahead and get into the build. So to play this, you can be any race. I will let you know that now. Its primary role is damage dealer. It does play some support as well, and it's very effective at both. Now to play this is the primary role, damage dealer, 64 points in the stamina. If you want to play this as any other role, damage dealer or tank or healer, you would take the 64 out of stamina, put it into magicka for healer, all 64 points. And if you want to play this as a tank, you take out of stamina and put enough into health to give you a good amount, close to 30k. They make great off tanks. Alright, now going over our stats, we do have 22k magicka because we are a Breton. We have 20k max health, 31k max stamina. We do have a 699 mag recovery, which I know seems kind of low, but we are a Dragon Knight, so we get resources back from activating ultimates and stuff. Our next one is health recovery. We do have a 321 health recovery with a 915 stam recovery. As you can see, we have 2955 weapon damage with a 48% weapon critical. We do also have a 1736 spell damage, 28% spell critical. The reason I'm telling you about the spell crit and spell damage is for when you play this as a healer or what some of the abilities you might use. Now, moving on to spell resist, we have 18,407 with a 15,000 physical resist. I think I've got something off here. I will have to look real quick. No, I do not. That is just how much I have, so. Alright, moving on. We are using the Thief Mundus Stone for the higher spell and weapon critical rating. You can try with the Lover Mundus Stone, but you just don't have enough high weapon crit to do it. And that's why we use the Thief. We are using Tri-Stat Food. This is going to give you max health, max magic, and stamina. So Tri-Stat Food is the best option here. You can use Dubious Cameron Throne if you want to be more physical-based damage or more based on stamina. But I like I like having all access. So moving on to the equipment and potions, we do use Tri-Stat Pots for our tanking purposes. We do use the spell power pots for when we're playing healer, and we use warrior power pots or stamina power pots for when we're playing damage dealer. Alright, now going over the sets, and you guys are going to probably wonder because I use Cillatrix a lot, and Cillatrix is our first set for this, but the reason why is dragon hunters like to use the power of the dragon to hunt dragons, so they actually use their enemies' own abilities against them. So this kind of represents the ground shaking from when a dragon lands and the force it puts into that landing. So this gives you the max stamina on the 1 piece, the 2 piece. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create an earthquake under the enemy that erupts after 1.5 seconds, dealing X amount of physical damage to all enemies within 4 meters and stunning them for 3 seconds. This effect can occur once every 5.5 seconds. Now, please understand that the reason I said X amount of physical damage is because this can change based on how many points you have in your CP, in one of your CPs. So just remember that. Alright, now moving on to the next set. We are using Hunting's Rage. 2-piece weapon critical, 3-piece max stamina, 4-piece weapon critical, 5-piece weapon damage. Now this is to maximize our character's physical aspects. So our physical damage, our weapon damage, that kind of stuff. Now moving on to the next set. And this is where people are going to get confused, but don't be confused. We are using Flame Blossom. Now this is a really cool set because this one on the 2-piece gives you max magicka, 3-piece spell damage, 4-piece spell penetration, and then the 5-piece. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to summon a line of flames that moves forward after 1 second, dealing 10,560 flame damage to enemies in its path. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. This is to basically represent the dragon's breath. So, but it works in really great combination with Silatrix. So, alright, now we're going to go over the traits and enchants on the gear, and then we'll move into the weapons. So, starting with the monster set, we are using an infused helm here with a tri-stat enchant medium armor. The tri-stat is so we can hybridize, so we can play into all 3 roles. The infused enchant is to increase the enchantment effect of our tri-stats. Moving on to the shoulders, we are using Divine's max stamina. You guys probably guessed that. Divine's is to maximize our Mundustone use. The max stamina is to maximize our stamina pool. On the chest, we are using a reinforced heavy chest with a tri-stat enchant, so we can hybridize the reinforced to maximize the heavy armor resistances to its maximum potential. Sorry about the phlegm, guys. Moving on to the rest of the smaller pieces, we are using a Divine's medium gloves with max stamina, again to maximize that Mundustone and the stamina for the high stamina pool. On the belt, we are using a light belt crafted. Now remember, Hunting's Rage is a crafted set, so this is, you can make light, and this you can make heavy. So this is going to maximize our resistances in the long run by putting this light. Again, the max stamina to boost our stamina pool, and the Divines to give us the higher Mundustone effect. Moving on to the leggings, we are using infused again here with tri-stat to maximize our resource pool. Excuse me, don't mean to do that. But to maximize our resource pools. The increased enchantment effect is really nice. And then moving on to the boots, we are using Divine's max stamina, medium armor, and the legs are medium. So the way this is set up is the boots, the legs, the gloves, the shoulders, and the helm are medium, the chest is heavy, and the belt is light. Moving on to the jewelry, we are using 2 Tri-Rune rings of the Flame Blossom. This is so we can maximize our attributes, so we can hybridize, and both rings are Tri-Rune with weapon damage. The reason for the higher weapon damage is so we can maximize our damage output through physical damage primarily. Now moving on to the necklace, we are using a Bloodthirsty with a stamina recovery enchant. The Bloodthirsty will increase our damage against enemies under 25% health by 10%, which is really nice. And then moving on to the weapons, starting with the main hand, we are using an axe. One-handed weapon with a poison damage enchant, Sherman. Sharpen is to increase our physical and spell penetration, and then the poison enchant is just to add extra damage to our character. On the offhand, we are using an Nernhone weapon with an absorbed stamina. This is to maximize our damage output, but that higher physical damage from the enchant and the stamina restore really helps us keep our resources in check. And then moving on to the back bar, we are using an infused bow with a weapon damage enchant. This is to maximize both our weapon and spell damage with the infused enchant, or the infused trait, so we get that higher weapon and spell damage. The other nice thing is we can keep this up all the time. It's not just 5 seconds. It procs for 5 seconds, but because the way the skills we use and how we use them, it'll keep it applied more often to us and more effectively. Alright, now that I've shown you the skills, or the gear, we're going to go over to skills, and we're going to go over the skills starting with the class skills. Now, I do take all the class active abilities ultimates, and passive abilities for all 3 skill lines. The reason why, this way I can take advantage of them in any role necessary, whether that's a tank, a healer, or damage dealer. So, works out really well. Now, moving on to the weapon skills, since we primarily use dual wield and bow, we do unlock the ultimate, active abilities, and passives for both of these, so we can take advantage of those skills when we need to. There is a set amount of skills that we use on our bar, but we want to have access to more. Light armor, we take the top 3 passives. Medium armor, since this is a medium armor build, we take all the passives plus the active ability, and I use shuffle in PvP, so medium armor, I take the top 3 passives. Moving on to world skills, you can be a vampire or a werewolf with this, either one works. Soul magic is the next skill line that we go into, and the top 3 abilities, the ultimate, the active ability, and the first passive, are optional. But I do use these, so I take them all. And on top of that, I do take soul summons and soul lock. These are both very important ones. Moving on to guild skills. Fighter's Guild. I take the ultimate, active abilities, and passives here as well, so I can use these abilities in different roles. Same thing with the Mage's Guild. I take the ultimate, active abilities, and passives. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the Fighter's Guild ability called Silver Shards, because I don't use the Silver Leash for when I'm tanking to pull enemies. The reason I use Silver Shards is because this does X amount of damage, okay, to the enemy. But if the enemy is a vampire, werewolf, or undead, and undead includes ghosts, or sorry, skeletons, zombies, vampires, ghosts, liches, spirits, and I forget, or wraiths, and I forget there's another one, but all 7 of those enemies are considered undead. So I get extra weapon damage for having any of these skills slotted. On top of that, I earn ultimate whenever I kill an undead, daedra, or werewolf. And then I get skilled tracker, which means I get increased damage against undead, daedra, and werewolves while using that ability. So that ability is actually stronger with this. Mage's Guild. I do unlock the ultimate, active abilities, and passives. Same thing with the Sigic Order. And some of these I do use in different situations, like Min Spirit I use when I'm playing a damage dealer. I might use this one for when I'm playing tank for resource management. I also like to use Crushing Weapon. And the reason why I like to use these abilities is so I can take advantage of the passives down here, like Spell Orb, which means I summon these orbs, and after I generate enough of them, they will go out and deal X amount of either magic or physical damage, whichever is higher in my stats. I also get Concentrated Barrier when I have one of these abilities slotted. This way, whenever I block, I get a damage shield, and that shield recharges back to full strength after 10 seconds of not blocking. And then I also get Deliberation. So anytime I channel any of these abilities, I get 30% damage reduction. So that's why I like to use Min Spirit and this Introspection. Moving on to Undaunted, I do take all the active abilities here. Every single one of these is a synergy, so it works really out well in group play, and it also affects this Undaunted command. So whenever you activate a synergy, you get 4% of your max health, stamina, and magicka back. The next ability, passive, is Undaunted Metal, and you want to get this one too because this increases your max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% for each type of armor you're wearing, so heavy, medium, and light. And since we are using that setup, we get 6% increase to those stats. Moving on to Alliance War, Assault skills. We do take the Assault Ultimate and these 2 passive abilities, Echoing Vigor and Razor Caltrops, because these work in PvE. Now, Rapid Maneuvers does as well, and so does Magicka Detonation, but not a lot of people use those. So I don't unlock those unless I'm playing PvP or I'm playing in Cyrodiil. Same thing goes with the passives. Now, when it comes to support, I do unlock the passive, Efficient Purge, Stalwart Guard, and Replenishing Barrier for when I play more of a support character. Moving on to racial skills. Breton is our race, Now, like I said, any race can work for this, and Bretons are primarily a magic race, so we get increased max magicka by 2,000. We also get spell atonement, which increases our spell resistance by 2310, and the effect is doubled if we are afflicted with chilled, burning, or concussed. And we also increase our mag recovery by 100. We get Magicka Mastery, which reduces the cost of our magic abilities by 7%. So this really allows us to play more magical effective. When we need to be, like a healer or something, we can actually take advantage of that. Now, going over the skills we have on our bars, starting with the first ability, we have Blood Craze. Now, this does X amount of physical damage up front, and then X amount of damage to the target over 10 seconds. While it's dealing damage, it heals you every 2 seconds. And people are going to be like, dude, Sherman, you use that a lot. I do use this ability a lot. I either use this or Raining Slashes with Bloodthirst, or I use Bloodthirst with, or the other one, Rapid Strikes with Blood Craze. Now, moving on to the next ability we have is called Venomous Claw. Now, this does X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 10 seconds, and the poison seeps into the target and deals increased damage the longer it lasts, dealing 12% more damage every 2 seconds. So it does grow 5 times by 12%. The next ability we have is called Silver Shards. Now this one, you fire the Dawn Guard's Vampire Hunter crossbow bolt to strike an enemy, dealing X amount of physical damage and reducing their movement speed by 40% for 4 seconds. Fires up to 5 additional bolts at other enemies near the initial target for 47% less damage. But remember, all this stuff can be boosted because of our Fighters Guild passives. Next ability we have is called Noxious Breath. This does X amount of physical damage and additional X amount of poison damage and additional X amount of poison damage over 10 seconds. Afflicts enemy with major fracture, reducing their physical resistance by 5,280, which is awesome. And then the next ability we have is called Molten Whip. Now, a lot of people are going to question this. Why do you have this? Blah, blah, blah. One, it does X amount of flame damage on a hit, but if you strike at the target, an enemy that is immobilized, stunned, or set off balance, okay? So, I don't know what that means, but... So, basically, if you strike the enemy, an enemy that is immobilized, yeah, you set them off balance. So, they're immobilized or stunned. Now, while slotted, whenever you activate a different Ardent Flame ability, you gain stacks of Seething Fury that increase the damage of your next Molten Whip by 33%, and your weapon and spell damage by 125 for 5 seconds. This effect can stack up to 3 times. So it increases all weapon and spell damage. The next ability we have is called Flawless Dawnbreaker. This does X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 6 seconds. It's very powerful, and while slotted, your weapon damage is increased by 5%. Moving on to the back bar, where we have our bow. Our first ability here is called Rearming Trap. Now this does this takes 1.5 seconds to set after the trap is put out. It does X amount of damage up front, does X amount of damage over 6 seconds, and immobilizes the enemy for 6 seconds and grants you minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10%. After being triggered, the trap resets itself and can be triggered one more time. Next ability we have is called Poison Injection. This does X amount of poison damage on hit, X amount of poison damage over 10 seconds, and the damage you over time deals up to 260% more damage to enemies under 50% health. Next ability we have is called Acid Spray. Now this one does X amount of, you fire basically a burst of arrows in one shot, dealing X amount of poison damage to the enemy in front of you, and X amount of poison damage over 4 seconds. Next ability is called Endless Hail. This one you fire a multitude of arrows in the sky that rain down, dealing X amount of physical damage to enemies in the target area every 0.5 seconds for 10 seconds. This thing does a lot of damage. Our next ability is called Igneous Weapons, and this one, when you cast it, you give yourself Major Savagery and Major Brutality. Or Major Sorcery and Major Brutality. This increases spell and weapon damage by 20% for 42 seconds. But you also get the class passive, which is really great. Mountain's Blessing, which increases, gives you minor brutality for 20 seconds, increasing weapon damage by 10%, and you generate 3 ultimate while in combat. So that's why we have this here. And then on the back bar, the last ability we have is our last ultimate, and this is called Corrosive Armor. This one oxidizes the green dragon blood in your veins, limiting incoming damage by 3% of your max health, and dealing X amount of poison damage nearby enemies each second for 12 seconds. While active, your attacks ignore physical resistance. And that is our skills on this character. We're going to move on to CP now, our champion points. Starting with the red tree, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. 38 into medium armor focus, increasing physical resistance by 3250 while wearing 5 or more pieces of medium armor. Moving on over here, we have 31 into thick skin, reducing damage from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into hardy, reducing your damage taken from physical poison disease damage by 10%, and 43 into elemental defender, reducing your damage taken from flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. We also have 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing your break free costs by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. And then moving on to the middle tree, we have 75 into Mooncalf, increasing your stam recovery by 14%. 43 into Arcanus, increasing your mag recovery by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 into Tumbling, reducing the cost of dodge roll by 16%. 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree, we have a hybrid setup here. Now, the reason I did hybrid here is because there is the Rangers can use magic abilities really well. So I do like to take advantage of that. So we put 43 into Blessed, increasing healing done by 10%. 23 into Elfborn, increasing critical damage and critical healing done with magic abilities by 10%, and 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. Moving on over here, we have 35 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases the damage done with light and heavy attacks with two-handed, one-handed and shield, dual-wield, bow, weapons, and werewolf form by 20%. And then we have 40 into Master Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Moving on to the final tree, or final blue tree, we have 20 into Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 9%. 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 10%. And 43 into Mighty, increasing your physical, poison, disease damage done by 10%. Now, please remember, these characters are designed to hunt dragons. Now, they can also hunt other creatures because Rangers are hunters of the outskirts of civilization. They hunt down all kinds of stuff, from creatures to monsters to dragons to whatever, but these ones specialize in hunting dragons. Now, you guys probably want to see what this thing looks like in action, so we are going to go down here and do a quick parse on the precursor target dummy, and this is to represent damage in a dungeon, and then we will go up there to that one and see what it's like to parse on an enemy in a trial. And that is for organized play, large organized group play. So we are going to do our buffs and go through our rotation. Wide empty go off, poison injection. And also, just so you guys know, these are considered a undead, so they do take more damage. So we did 23k damage to this. We do get 4,754 weapon damage with a 2,925 spell damage. Now remember, this does go up based on the stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at our abilities here. Silver Shards was hitting for a lot of damage. Light attacks were hitting for a decent amount. Even our Molten Whip did decent. Flame Blossom does a decent amount, and so does Solitrex, but a lot of damage over time. So now what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to go up here and we're going to parse on this other one. Now this one will give me higher Magicka, health, and stamina, so my damage will be different. On top of that, it will give me every buff in the game that I can possibly want, and debuff applied to the boss, basically. So, Potion, Same thing, same rotation, everything. Really? But there you guys go. You can see we get roughly about 32, 33k DPS with this, and that's pretty good. Now, if you guys are wondering before I go into the dungeon, a lot of people have been asking me to tell you guys this, which monster sets and stuff we're using. I am using the set from Fang Lair. This is the Fang Lair, or is it it's either the Fang Lair or Skull Collar set. We'll run over here and take a quick look. And I can even tell you the dies. So we are using what is called Skull Collar set, and we are using these dies. We are using the Orichalcum Green, the Red Diamond Red, and the Earth Forge Iron Gray. And that is with all the weapons and everything. Alright. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to a dungeon, but before I do that, of course, I wanted to show you guys this. So this is what it showed in the end on that parse that we were doing, but as you can see, we had 34k stamina, 5,157 weapon damage, 64% weapon crit, 70% critical damage. This thing just is insane. 23,000 max magic, a 3,504 spell damage, 34% critical, and 70% critical damage. It's like, I don't even want to look at that. Every time I look at it, it makes me want to cringe. So now we're going to go ahead and head over to the Depths of Malatar dungeon. And I will show you guys this thing in action in a dungeon. Now, dungeon play, please understand this is going to be solo play. So I am going to make some adjustments to the character when I get there to make it more effective at solo playing and not so weak as a damage dealer kind of thing. So it's still going to be able to do damage, but it's also going to be very solo friendly and effective. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of the silver shards. We're not getting rid of them. We're actually going to move them in place of our molten whip. And then on the back bar, we are going to go ahead and move this out of the way and move it over. And actually, we're going to get rid of that too, even though I don't want to, but I want to keep this buff. And we are going to put our hardened armor back here, and then we are also going to grab our Alliance War skill, Echoing Vigor. Now, people are going to ask, why not Green Dragon's Blood? Green Dragon's Blood works really good if you have really high health, like a tank. It doesn't work so well when you have low health like this. So that's one of the reasons why we are using this as our buff. Oh, he's already dead. Dang it. Right, where's the big cheese? I saw him hiding around the corner there. And I'm gonna have to let him kill me, guys, because if I don't, he will teleport out and disappear, and if that happens, then yeah, he ain't gonna die. So that is the Dragon Hunter Ranger. I hope you guys like it. It was a lot of fun to make. It's a lot of fun to play. I was actually half tempted to turn one of my Dragon Knights into this because I think it would be a lot of fun to play, but I'm going for something else. So, but that is the Dragon Hunter Ranger. So you guys know what that means. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.